My name's Rachel Lynwood, and I've been working here at Gnibi, College of Indigenous Australian Peoples since 1998. And these days I'm teaching in our Bachelor of Trauma and Healing, but I've also done some teaching in our Master of Indigenous Studies Wellbeing degree as well. I was born in Taree, and Taree is on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, here in Australia, for those of you overseas. My mother's people are the Biripi people. On my father's side, we are Bundjalung, Gumbaynggirr and Dunghutti. Gnibi is situated on Widjabul country. The Widjabul people are another mob of people within the bigger Bundjalung nation. With the Bachelor of Trauma and Healing, that's really geared towards qualifying people to work in cross-cultural organisations, whether they be community-based, whether they be government departments, various non-government organisations and so forth, in working with people in areas that relate to trauma and healing. So if we think of, say, drug and alcohol counselling, if we think of working with women and children in welfare organisations, if we think about, working with, people that have got a history of, different forms of abuse, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse and so forth. This degree helps to further qualify people to work in those areas. So people that come into the course, they would learn about the deeper aspects of the various experiences and so forth of traumatisation amongst, humankind. There is an Indigenous focus, but certainly it's not limited to that. So we explore all the aspects of what traumatisation is, and not in the way that many would define it. What we do within trauma and healing, so for example in a number of the units, a few of them in particular that we teach here through Gnibi have a strong inter and transgenerational trauma focus. Okay, so this is where we talk about how trauma is transmitted or is transferred across generations. So if we locate that in an Aboriginal context within Australia, then we would look at, if we were to expand it out, beyond just the microcosm of the immediate family, we would look at how trauma has expanded and has been transferred across generations within Aboriginal families within Australia. We link that very strongly to the whole fact of colonisation, to the whole fact of what occurred at first contact, in deepening our understanding of the trauma cycles and how they actually work. So, for example, and this is something that Judy Atkinson's talked about as well, if we consider the fact that we have a history where we had convicts and so forth that were brought out from England and other areas, who were brought out on the prison hulks, and they had the experiences that they did of being traumatised as convicts. They came to Australia. They were put onto, what they used to call them, penal colonies or whatever. Yeah, and they would put them in these isolated areas where they experienced trauma themselves. So we have a history of that, and then how in the cycle of trauma, how if people are traumatised and that's left unresolved and it's not worked through and no healing is taking place, then they can transfer those same behaviours onto others. So we have the coloniser that has perpetrated those behaviours onto Aboriginal people, the colonised, so to speak. And so if we consider that and then look at how that's built a momentum over many, many years, then it helps us to understand how we've gotten to where we have come from. So we look at it in that way so that we see that it's not just about politics, although that's obviously comes into it. But it's not just about politics, it's not just about social issues, but in fact it's wanting to go in a bit deeper beyond that and to understand the story or the stories that lie beneath the surface to explain why people behave the way that they do. And then we get to expand our knowledge base and our understanding of what we're actually looking at here. So that's fundamentally when we talk about trauma within the trauma healing degree and the units within that degree that are taught through Gnibi. That's at the basis of it. So for example, within the unit trans and intergenerational trauma, we look at, and also in the biological effects of traumatic stress, which is one of the other units within the degree that we teach through here. We look at the experiences of, say, Holocaust survivors. Okay, so the whole fact of an attempted annihilating of people on the basis of, whether you want to call it race, cultural background, religion. Okay, so it's the same momentum. It's a very similar experience. It's not exactly the same, but in terms of people's experience of trauma, then do we really need to nitpick as to some of the finer points around that? Also, people that have been people that have experienced quite horrific torture. So, we look at that too.
Yeah.
Right. So, again, we don't move away from having an Indigenous focus, but we just don't stay there and not move outside of that, because for me the fact is, whether you're black, white or what you are, humans right across the planet have experienced various forms of traumatisation. And so I feel that in terms of broadening our understanding, it's good to be able to recognise the experience of peoples from various cultural backgrounds. And you can still stay true to what's happening here in Australia with Indigenous people. I always remain very true to that. First of all, we recognise healing as being an ongoing thing, that it's not some new age concept that is located out there in the ether, right? But in fact, it's something that's very real. And I feel if you really understand it, it's not particularly complicated. It has a simplicity about it if you really understand it. It really is just about people being able to start to connect with the truth of what they've experienced and being able to start to work through that. In terms of looking at it in a more, a wider scale, then it's really about, if we look at it in the very temporal, worldly sense, right? It's important, I feel, to have people that can work out in the field, that can work, whether they work in communities, and not everyone wants to do that. And to me, that's perfectly fine. Because there are various areas in which you can go into to work and to do something useful. But in a much more collective scale, like I was saying, it's very much about having people that want to go and work in the field and want to work within various organisations to work to address some of the needs that communities themselves are identifying. Rather than people saying, this is what your problems are, we're going to come and fix it. It's saying, the community saying for themselves, nominating very clearly for themselves, this is what's happening within our community, this is what's happening with our mob, and this is what we feel needs to happen to address it. So whether it's, drug and alcohol use, whether it's sexual violence, whether it's, kids bombing their brains out, sniffing petrol, whatever the issues are, and we know there's always more than one. There's all these myriad of all these different issues that all sort of come in together. Then it really is about people, being qualified to work in various, delivery services where they can actually start to address some of those things.